Racist cop pushes black man from VIP line silenced when he realizes he's the mayor. The air in the central square hummed with a mixture of anticipation and self-importance. Distinguished guests, clad in expensive fabrics and polished shoes, formed a winding queue leading to the cordoned-off VIP entrance of the gleaming new town hall. The low murmur of conversation, punctuated by polite laughter and the clinking of ice in early cocktail glasses, created a backdrop of sophisticated ease. Red velvet ropes, held aloft by polished stanchions, delineated the privileged space, guarded by personnel whose job was to ensure that only the right people crossed the threshold. Among them stood Officer Travis McNeil. Travis wasn't merely standing guard. He was observing, sifting, judging. Years on the force had honed his ability to make snap assessments based on appearance, posture, and the subtle cues people unknowingly broadcast. More often than not, his assessments were less about identifying threats and more about pigeonholing individuals into neat, predictable categories. He saw the world in stark lines. Us and them, deserving and undeserving, belonging and out of place. His crisp white shirt, perfectly knotted tie, and the badge pinned proudly to his chest seemed to amplify his inherent air of authority, an authority he wielded with casual, often dismissive, confidence. Travis McNeil was a man comfortable in his own skin, perhaps a little too comfortable, secure in his judgments and rarely challenged to look beyond the surface. He'd seen it all, he thought, and he knew exactly who belonged at an event like this. The line moved slowly, a river of privilege flowing towards the entrance. Travis's eyes scanned each approaching face, each carefully chosen outfit. His expression remained largely neutral, a mask of professional vigilance, but his internal tally was constant. Approval here, suspicion there, casual dismissal for those directed elsewhere. It was a rhythm he knew well. Then the rhythm broke, subtly but definitively. A man approached the line, not from the direction of the designated VIP parking, but walking across the main square as though he had simply arrived on foot. He was a black man, dressed in a suit, a simple, well-tailored charcoal gray suit, not ostentatious but clearly of good quality. His shoes were shined to a mirror finish. What set him apart, however, wasn't just his appearance or his race in this predominantly white, affluent gathering. It was his presence. There was an undeniable confidence in his stride, a calmness in his posture, and a directness in his gaze that spoke not of arrogance, but of self-possession. He didn't seem nervous or out of place or like someone who was hoping to get in. He looked like someone who expected to get in. Travis's gaze fixed on him. The casual assessment sharpened into something more pointed. A black man in a suit approaching this entrance, walking with that kind of confidence? Travis's internal alarm bells, finely tuned by years of implicit bias and ingrained assumptions, began to chime. He straightened up slightly, his stance becoming more rigid. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched the corner of his mouth. This was going to be easy. As the man reached the rope line, stepping into the flow of the queue, Travis held up a hand, not dismissively yet, but firmly. His voice, when he spoke, was laced with a condescending tone, a subtle implication of disbelief that this man could possibly be in the right place. "Hey!" Travis's voice cut through the low hum of the crowd. "Hold on there, fella. This area is for VIP guests. It's restricted access. Not just anyone can come through here." The phrase, "not just anyone," hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. The man stopped directly in front of Travis. He didn't flinch or show any sign of offense at the abrupt challenge or the patronizing tone. His expression remained calm, his eyes steady as they met Travis's. There was a quiet dignity about him that Travis found, perhaps unconsciously, irritating. "I understand," the man replied, his voice level and clear, without a trace of apology or hesitation. He reached a hand inside his jacket pocket, retrieving a crisp white envelope. "I have an invitation." He extended the invitation towards Travis. But Travis didn't take it. Jay didn't even really look at it. His eyes remained fixed on the man's face, then flickered down to the man's hand holding the envelope, then back up to his eyes. The decision had already been made, solidified the moment Travis saw him approaching. The invitation, or lack thereof, was irrelevant to Travis's initial, ingrained judgment. Travis's smirk widened slightly, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. He wasn't interested in proof. He was operating on something else entirely. With a subtle but firm movement, Travis lowered his hand from its stop position and used it to push lightly against the man's chest. It wasn't a violent shove, but it was a clear physical redirection, a gesture meant to assert dominance and force compliance. The man stumbled back a single step, out of the neat line of VIP hopefuls. "Look," Travis said, his voice losing the thinly veiled politeness and becoming more direct, more impatient. "There are a lot of events happening today. You've probably just got the wrong entrance. The public access is over there." He gestured vaguely with his head towards another part of the square, where a larger crowd was visible behind a different set of barriers. It was a dismissal, plain and simple, delivered with the confidence of someone who believed his word was final. The small commotion drew attention. People in the line turned their heads, their conversations dying down. Eyes scanned the scene, the uniformed officer, the black man standing slightly apart, the unspoken tension. A few polite smiles tightened into expressions of curiosity, or perhaps judgment aimed not at Travis, but at the man he had just stopped. A woman in a striking red dress, standing just behind where the man had been, leaned in to her companion and whispered, loud enough for several people, including Travis and the man, to hear, "Oh, he must have come to the wrong place. Looks a bit lost." A ripple of quiet, knowing laughter spread through a small cluster of people nearby. The whispers and the laughter, soft as they were, felt like physical blows in the charged atmosphere. The man who had been pushed didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice in protest. He didn't appeal to the onlookers. He simply stood there for a moment, accepting the physical redirection and the public dismissal without outward resistance. But then his gaze, which had briefly dropped to where Travis had touched him, rose again to meet the officer's eyes. This time the look was different. It wasn't angry. It wasn't pleading. It wasn't even sad. It was cold, yes, but not with malice. It was heavy, filled with a profound, weary disappointment that seemed to see right through Travis, through the uniform, through the facade of authority, to something smaller, pettier, and more pathetic beneath. It was the kind of look that made Travis, despite himself, feel momentarily exposed, as if his internal thought process had just been laid bare for inspection and found wanting. There was no challenge in the look, no threat, only a silent, weighty acknowledgement of the reality of the situation. An acknowledgement that was far more potent than any shouted accusation could have been. It was the silence, more than anything, that made Travis uncomfortable. After holding that gaze for just a few seconds, though it felt longer to Travis, the man turned away. He didn't stomp off in a huff, didn't linger as if hoping for a change of heart. He simply turned, slowly and deliberately, and walked away from the VIP line, back across the square towards the general public area. His back was straight, his head held high. He walked with the same quiet confidence with which he had arrived, the picture of dignity in the face of casual contempt. Travis watched him go. The slight smirk was gone now, replaced by a faint frown of unease. He had won in a way. He had successfully prevented the man from entering the VIP area. He had done his job, upheld the invisible boundary. But the man's silence, that heavy, unreadable look, and the sheer composure of his departure left a sour taste. It wasn't the reaction Travis was used to. Usually, people either argued vehemently or slunk away dejected. This was different. It was like the man hadn't even seen Travis as an obstacle, but merely as a regrettable temporary feature of the landscape. The incident was over, the line was moving again, the murmuring conversations resumed, but that single silent look lingered in Travis McNeil's mind. A small, sharp, unexplained piece of a puzzle he didn't yet realize he was looking at. The man was gone. He had walked away with a quiet grace that was far more impactful than any angry outburst could have been. Officer Travis McNeil resumed his duty, his eyes scanning the faces of arriving guests, managing the flow, maintaining the barrier between the exclusive and the ordinary. But the image of the man in the charcoal suit, and more specifically, the memory of his cool, appraising gaze, was stubbornly lodged in Travis's mind. It was like a small, sharp pebble in his shoe, not crippling, but constantly there, a minor irritation he couldn't quite shake off. Why hadn't the man argued? Why that silent, knowing look? Travis was used to either bluster or defeat, not that unnerving blend of calm confidence and profound, unspoken disappointment. It didn't fit neatly into any of the categories Travis typically used to define people. It was an anomaly, a loose thread in the fabric of his predictable world. The afternoon wore on. The VIP area began to fill with city officials, prominent business leaders, and local celebrities, their laughter and chatter creating a steady, affluent soundtrack. Travis exchanged brief nods with familiar faces, directed late arrivals, and maintained his vigilant posture. He tried to focus on the task at hand, the security, the smooth running of the entrance, but every so often, his mind would drift back to the brief, potent encounter. He found himself replaying the man's calm voice saying, "I have an invitation." The moment he pushed him back, the collective gaze and whispers of the crowd, and that final, piercing look before the man turned and walked away. It was a small incident, insignificant in the grand scheme of opening a new town hall, yet it clung to him. A fellow officer, Mike Rodriguez, a younger guy who'd been stationed further down the square, took a quick break and walked over to Travis, stretching his arms. "Mike, hot one today, huh, Travis? Glad this part's almost over. Just gotta get through the speeches." Travis, "Yeah, almost there." Mike, "Crazy crowd. Everyone's buzzing about the new building, obviously, but mostly about the mayor. Can you believe nobody really knows what he looks like? All the photos are blurry or old. Keeps a pretty tight lid on things." Travis, "Never seen anything like it. Must be some kind of private guy." Mike, "Private doesn't even cover it. Mysterious is more like it. They say he's a real game changer though. Big plans for the city. Everyone's dying to hear what he's got to say, and finally put a face to the name. Huge deal, this reveal." Mike scanned the VIP crowd with interest. "Wonder what he's like. Probably some old, rich power broker, you think?" Travis shrugged, non-committal, but the conversation about the mysterious new mayor added another layer to the day's atmosphere of anticipation. A game changer, a big reveal, a figure shrouded in secrecy. The public's fascination with the unknown leader filled the air with a tangible sense of curiosity. Travis, like everyone else, felt that curiosity, wondering who this powerful, unseen figure could be. The conversation with Mike reinforced the significance of the event beyond just the building. This was the moment the city would meet its new leader. This was the unveiling of a person who held the reins of power. Travis, caught up in the general buzz, remained oblivious to the connection between the small, bothersome incident he'd experienced and the monumental reveal that was minutes away. The piece of the mosaic representing the unknown mayor and the piece representing the man he'd dismissed were still unconnected in his mind. He saw the man only as an anomaly, an irritant, and the mayor as a distant, powerful figure about to step into the spotlight. The irony was building, hidden just beneath the surface of Travis's awareness, waiting for the perfect moment to erupt. He was standing at the edge of a precipice, looking in the wrong direction. The hum of conversation in the square began to subside as the ceremony on the main stage prepared to begin. The master of ceremonies, a local news anchor known for her polished delivery, stepped up to the podium. A hush fell over the crowd, a collective holding of breath. Microphones were adjusted, cameras focused. This was it, the moment everyone had been waiting for. The air crackled with anticipation. All eyes were fixed on the stage. The MC smiled broadly, her voice amplified and echoing across the square. She delivered a short, eloquent introduction praising the city's past, its potential, and the promise of a new era. She built the suspense expertly, her words painting a picture of a leader with vision, integrity, and dedication. MC. And now, her voice swelled with excitement. The moment we have all been waiting for. It is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce the person who will deliver the inaugural address and officially cut the ribbon on our magnificent new town hall. The leader who will guide our city forward, embodying our hopes and aspirations. Please join me in welcoming the new mayor of our city, the Honorable Derek Miles. For a fraction of a second, there was stunned silence across the square. The name, Derek Miles. Travis McNeil, standing rigidly by the VIP rope, felt the name hit him like a physical blow. Derek Miles. Where had he heard that name? It was so recent, And then the man stepped onto the stage. He was the same man from the VIP line. The man in the simple, well-tailored charcoal gray suit. The man with the straight posture and the calm, self-possessed air. It was him, Derek Miles. The man Travis McNeil had stopped. The man Travis McNeil had dismissed as not belonging. The man Travis McNeil had lightly pushed away from the VIP entrance just a couple of hours ago, assuming he was lost or trying to sneak in. The shock that coursed through Travis was immediate and overwhelming. His face drained of color, turning a sickly white. His hands, which had been resting against the metal barrier, began to tremble violently, the shaking originating deep within his core. His breath caught in his throat. His carefully constructed world of easy judgments and predictable outcomes shattered in an instant. Mayor? This man? The man he had? The initial stunned silence from the crowd was quickly replaced by a thunderous wave of applause. People cheered, they whistled, they stamped their feet. Derek Miles, their new mayor, stood on the stage, a picture of calm dignity, accepting the ovation. As the applause began to subside, Derek Miles walked to the center of the stage. He paused for a moment, looking out at the sea of faces before him. His gaze swept across the crowd, calm and steady. and then his eyes found Travis. Travis was frozen, unable to move, unable to tear his eyes away despite the churning in his stomach. Derek's gaze settled on him, from a distance of perhaps 50 yards, yet it felt intensely personal, as if they were the only two people in the square. It was the same look from before. Not angry, not vengeful, not triumphant. It was simply there, profound, knowing, and utterly devoid of malice. It acknowledged Travis, acknowledged the encounter, and in that moment, communicated a depth of understanding and a quiet power that transcended any need for words or retribution. For Travis, standing there in his uniform, the recipient of that calm, unwavering gaze, it was unbearable. The full weight of his earlier arrogance, his casual prejudice, his blatant disrespect, crashed down on him. He felt exposed, humiliated, and utterly insignificant. The contrast between his petty exercise of perceived authority and the man's true, undeniable position of power was staggering. He couldn't hold the gaze. His eyes dropped, focusing on the polished toe of his own boot. He hunched his shoulders slightly, trying to shrink, to disappear into the background. He, the man in uniform, the gatekeeper, had been judged not by an angry retort, but by a quiet look and a profound, silent irony. The mosaic was now terrifyingly clear, and Travis was the foolish figure exposed at its center. The shock of the revelation hung heavy in the air, a palpable tension that momentarily overshadowed the festive atmosphere. All eyes were now on the stage, not just out of anticipation for the inaugural speech, but out of sheer disbelief and dawning realization. The man who had moments ago been a figure of casual contempt for one officer and an unknown quantity for the rest, was now revealed as the city's highest elected official. But the most powerful part of this story wasn't the reveal itself. It was what followed. It was the moment the new mayor chose to speak, not just to dedicate a building, but to deliver a message that would echo far beyond the walls of the new town hall, reaching deep into the hearts and minds of those who heard it. This speech wasn't going to be about policy or infrastructure. It was going to be about prejudice, about dignity, and about the quiet, devastating power of truth. Prepare to listen, for the true lesson is about to begin. Mayor Derek Miles stood at the podium. The initial thunder of applause had subsided, replaced by a profound, expectant hush. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on him, a mixture of awe, curiosity, and for some, a simmering discomfort. Travis McNeil, still rooted to his spot by the VIP rope, his face pale and eyes fixed on the ground, felt the collective gaze of the crowd occasionally sweep over him, a physical manifestation of his humiliation. He wished the ground would open up and swallow him whole. He was no longer just a security detail, he was Exhibit A. Derek Miles began to speak. His voice was calm, measured, and carried across the square with quiet authority. He didn't start with the standard greetings or acknowledgments. Instead, he took a deep breath and began, not a speech, but a story. Derek, good afternoon, everyone. We gather today to celebrate the opening of this magnificent new building, a symbol of our city's future. But before we talk about the bricks and mortar, the steel and glass that make up this structure, I want to share a different kind of foundation stone with you. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the crowd, calm and steady, before momentarily settling back on the area where Travis stood, though he didn't point or single him out verbally. Derek, just a short while ago, as I prepared to enter this very location, a place I am meant to occupy as your duly elected mayor, I was stopped. A ripple went through the crowd. People exchanged confused glances. Stopped? The mayor? Derek continued, his voice gaining a subtle, quiet intensity that commanded absolute attention. I was stopped and told that this area was restricted, that it was for VIP guests, and that not just anyone could come through. He held up the invitation envelope briefly, then placed it back on the podium. I presented my invitation, but it wasn't looked at. He paused again, letting the simple facts hang in the air. The crowd was utterly silent now, every ear strained to hear his next words. Travis felt a cold dread pooling in his stomach. He knew exactly where this was going. Derek's eyes seemed to look past the physical structure of the building into the collective consciousness of the city. I was stopped not because I lacked the proper credentials, not because I looked suspicious, not because I presented any kind of threat. His voice remained calm, but the weight behind the words grew immense. Derek, I was stopped and turned away because I am a black man, wearing a suit, standing in a line of people who looked different from me. The silence that followed this statement was deafening. It wasn't just quiet. It was a shocked, uncomfortable void where the festive chatter had been moments before. Hundreds of heads turned, slowly but surely, towards the VIP entrance area. Their eyes didn't just look at the ropes anymore. They looked for the officer who had been standing there, the one in uniform. They looked for Travis McNeil. Travis felt their gazes like a physical weight. He could feel himself flushing, his ears burning, even as his face remained unnaturally pale. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to deny it, to explain himself, but no words came. He just stood there, a statue of shame, the unwitting star of the mayor's impromptu opening act. Derek continued, his voice taking on a more reflective tone. This tells us something important. It tells us that even in a new era, with a new building, with new leadership, the old lines of assumption, the old barriers of prejudice are still present. They exist not just in grand, sweeping gestures, but in small, everyday interactions. In a look, in a tone of voice, in a decision made based on how someone looks, rather than who they are. He looked out at the crowd, his expression one of gentle, firm conviction. But I am not angry. I do not stand here seeking retribution or demanding an apology from the individual involved. Travis, who had braced himself for a public shaming, felt a flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by bewildered relief, and then a deeper, more complex mix of emotions. Derek, because true justice, the kind that heals and moves us forward, is not found in forcing someone to kneel in shame. It is found in the quiet power of truth. It is found in shining a light on the hidden corners of our biases. My silence in that moment, and my truth in this moment, that is the most profound justice I can ask for. He concluded his story, and then seamlessly transitioned into a message of unity, of building bridges, of creating a city where everyone belonged, not just within the walls of the new town hall, but within the heart of the community itself. The contrast between the petty exclusion he had just described and the inclusive vision he was now painting was stark and powerful. As Mayor Miles finished his formal remarks and the first, tentative claps began, the atmosphere was different. It wasn't just polite applause. It was applause mixed with reflection, with a sense of having witnessed something raw and important. People glanced at Travis, no longer with simple curiosity or approval of authority, but with a new understanding, perhaps even pity or disapproval. He wasn't Officer McNeil anymore. He was the embodiment of the mayor's example. Derek stepped away from the podium, the applause now growing stronger, more appreciative, as the weight of his message truly sunk in. He walked along the edge of the stage, acknowledging the crowd, before beginning to descend the steps towards the ground level. His path, intentionally or not, led him directly back towards the VIP entrance, back towards Travis. Travis watched him approach, a knot tightening in his stomach. He couldn't look up. His eyes remained fixed on the ground, his body tense. He didn't know what he expected. A stern word? A look of contempt? Derek stopped just a few feet away from Travis. The surrounding crowd seemed to melt away, their conversations dropping to whispers as they watched the interaction. Derek didn't raise his voice. He spoke softly, his tone still calm, perhaps even tinged with a quiet empathy that Travis didn't understand. Derek, we don't need anyone to kneel, officer. We just need them to know how to stand up correctly. It wasn't a command or an accusation. It was a statement, a final, pointed thought delivered directly to the person who needed to hear it most. Travis slowly, hesitantly, lifted his head. His eyes, red-rimmed and glistening, met Derek's. In that moment, he saw not an adversary, but a man who had endured a small indignity and used it to illuminate a larger truth. The arrogance that had defined Travis for so long felt utterly hollow. He had been judged, not by the law he wore on his sleeve, but by a moral code far more profound, and he had been found wanting. It was a lesson delivered not with punishment, but with a quiet, undeniable truth that cut him to the core. The story of Officer McNeil and Mayor Miles is more than just an anecdote about a public figure facing prejudice. It is a powerful illustration of how deeply ingrained biases can shape our perceptions and actions, often unconsciously. It is a lesson that true strength and dignity do not lie in asserting dominance or seeking revenge for wrongs, but in maintaining composure, speaking the truth with clarity, and allowing the reality of a situation to serve as its own most potent form of justice. Derek Miles did not need Travis McNeil to be fired, publicly disgraced beyond what was already happening, or forced to apologize. His goal was not retribution, but enlightenment, both for the individual and for the community gathered there. His final words to Travis: "We don't need anyone to kneel. We just need them to know how to stand up correctly," encapsulate a philosophy of uplift rather than subjugation. It suggests that the focus should be on correcting behavior and understanding, on helping individuals rise above their prejudices and stand on the side of equality and respect, rather than forcing them into a position of submission. It is a call for growth, for awareness, and for a shift in perspective that benefits everyone. The quiet confidence of Derek, his refusal to be reduced by another's prejudice, and his decision to use the incident as a teaching moment, offer a profound model for overcoming adversity with grace and impact. With his quiet, impactful words delivered, Mayor Derek Miles offered a final, brief nod that might have been intended for Travis, or perhaps just as a concluding gesture to the moment. He then turned and continued his walk, moving past the spot where Travis stood, and proceeded towards the main entrance of the new town hall. The doors parted for him, and he stepped inside the building that, just minutes ago, he had been told he couldn't enter. Now he entered it as the city's leader, his rightful place secured not by force, but by the undeniable truth of his identity and the power of his message. No one dared question him now. The camera lingers for a final moment, drawing back slightly. It settles on the figure of Travis McNeil. He is still standing there, his head no longer bowed, but his gaze heavy, looking out at nothing in particular. The vibrant scene of the celebration continues around him, but he seems separate from it, encased in the weight of his recent revelation. Behind him, catching the late afternoon sun, the American flag flies high, its red, white, and blue a potent symbol of the ideals the nation strives for, yet often falls short of achieving. Travis stands beneath it, a man grappling with the stark contrast between those ideals and his own actions, a man who has just received a lesson he will never forget. The story ends here, but its questions linger. How do we recognize our own biases? How do we choose dignity over anger in the face of injustice? How can truth, delivered with calm conviction, be the most powerful force for change? This single piece of the mosaic has revealed a profound picture. If this story has prompted you to reflect, to question, or to seek out more examples of resilience and the triumph of character over prejudice, then its message has resonated. We invite you to explore other stories on our channel that delve into the complexities of human experience, challenge assumptions, and inspire us to stand tall in our own truth.